We're looking at the entire 2025 output of a podcast called the Cartridge and Quest Podcast.
Or C&Q, as they call it.
That's right. Our mission today is a full 2025 year-end retrospective. We have gone through every single episode from 105 all the way to 141.
That is a monumental stack of sources.
It is, and the goal is to give you, the learner, the ultimate shortcut to understanding the show's specific blend of surprising historical depth, personal reflection, and just outright absurdity.
And what a subject to analyze. The sources really paint this vibrant, high-energy picture of a weekly discussion driven by two friends, Average Trav and Foodie Mike.
The next part is critical to their whole premise.
It is. Both were born in 1985.
The exact year the Nintendo Entertainment System landed in North America.
I mean, you can't make that up. And that shared landmark really defines everything for them. It's all about retro gaming, 90s nostalgia, nerd history.
And, maybe most importantly, their journey from blowing dust out of cartridges to, navigating fatherhood and career changes today.
C&Q really operates on two levels. First, it's just highly detailed nostalgia. They get the facts, right?
But second, it's a commentary on a generational shift. We analyze their whole year to pull out the best, the weirdest, and the most insightful nuggets.
And this exploration isn't just about remembering old games or forgotten tech.
No, it's about understanding how two people use those shared cultural touchstones to make sense of the overwhelming realities of being an adult in the 21st century.
So why should you care about this? If you grew up in that era, this is just pure gold.
And if you didn't, it's a foundation for understanding modern digital culture.
Exactly. Their journey perfectly illustrates how reflections on a common past, whether it's the frustration of dial-up or some absurd wrestling gimmick.
It gives them a shared language.
A shared language for confronting a hyper-paced present. It's a shortcut to understanding the experiences that shaped a whole generation.
The first major theme that just jumped out from their 2025 content was this deep reverence they have for foundational technology.
Oh, absolutely. They treat certain tech launches not just as commercial events, but as
genuine cultural earthquakes.
Okay, let's start right there. If there was one tech release the C&Q hosts held up as an absolute paradigm shift, it was the launch of Windows 95.
Yeah, covered extensively in their episode 126. And they didn't just call it a software upgrade, they called it a cultural earthquake.
Right, one that fundamentally changed how America viewed personal computing.
And that's a crucial distinction. We all know that Windows 95 had this estimated marketing budget of, $300 million?
A staggering number. But they didn't just recite the number, they analyzed what that number represented.
It was Microsoft deciding to use Hollywood-style blockbuster marketing for software.
I mean, $300 million back then was just astronomical. Microsoft didn't just buy ads, they created spectacles.
They lit up the Empire State Building in Windows colors.
And crucially, they licensed Start Me Up by the Rolling Stones as the theme song.
The host pointed out the sheer genius of that choice.
Yeah.
It instantly gave a dry tech product this sense of rock and roll cool, It made it accessible.
They really emphasized that for the average person, this was the moment computing became cool and easy. People were lining up for this software.
The C&Q hosts argued that this entire campaign really defined the beginning of the consumer digital age. It shifted computing from this niche, business-focused thing to a mass-market aspirational product.
It standardized the start button, the desktop,
Yeah.
all the things we take for granted now.
That reverence for tech also extended to hardware that was maybe a bit too ambitious for its own good.
Right, which led to some really interesting historical tech lessons. Episode 137 saw them analyzing revolutionary but ultimately failed tech, specifically Atari.
They spent a lot of time on the Atari Lynx. Here is a 16-bit handheld system released way back in 1989.
And they described it accurately as basically having a Super Nintendo in your hands.
Years before the SNES even launched, it had a gorgeous color backlit screen, impressive power, and they contrasted this with the Game Boy.
Which was monochrome, bulky, underpowered.
And yet it completely dominated the market.
I think that's the key insight C&Q pulled out for you. Sometimes execution and price point matter way more than raw power.
For sure, the Lynx just burned through batteries, and it was expensive. The Game Boy, for all its limits, was cheap, tough, and had phenomenal battery life.
The host argued that this was an early, brutal lesson in tech economics. Portability and longevity just trumped graphics in the handheld space.
They also covered the Atari Jaguar, the 64-bit monster.
Same episode, right?
Yeah. Again, technically ambitious, the first 64-bit console, but it was completely hampered by a lack of developer support, the cost, and that famously complicated controller.
So the failure of both of those systems really provided this useful backdrop for understanding why Nintendo and Sony dominated the later 90s.
Exactly. They understood the need for a streamlined, affordable, and developer-friendly ecosystem.
And while those systems were kind of struggling, the true foundation of modern life was being quietly built.
Yes, episodes 130 and 137 had them revisiting the dawn of the internet, which gave us some pretty hilarious historical facts.
During Google's origins.
The hosts highlighted that the search engine was originally named Backrub.
Backrub. It just instantly anchors you in that pre-billion-dollar IPO garage project era of tech.
Can you imagine trying to explain the verb to backrub something in a professional setting today?
It just completely lacks that institutional seriousness Google eventually adopted, but joking aside, they paid some serious focused credit to Tim Berners-Lee.
And this is where their analysis went deep. The hosts were just astounded by his foresight.
He created the core architecture of the World Wide Web in 1990.
And they emphasized that the core protocols he defined, HTTP and HTML, are still the foundation of the entire modern web 35 years later.
That level of foundational endurance is just so rare in tech. They saw it as nothing short of an architectural miracle that those initial simple frameworks could scale to what we have today.
It's incredible.
So moving from system architecture and foresight to moral panic and regulation.
A very different side of the coin.
C&Q also delved into a darker but highly impactful corner of gaming history, censorship. Episode 140 focused heavily on the moral outrage around games like Night Trap.
This is a critical point because it fundamentally reshaped the entire industry. Night Trap for the Sega CD was this interactive movie with live-action footage.
And the content, which involved live actors and implied violence against women, was enough to trigger actual Senate hearings.
Yeah, the game itself was flawed, as the hosts noted. Poor execution, limited gameplay. But the moral panic was just completely disproportionate to the quality of the game itself.
Wait, so you're telling me a B-movie interactive game caused actual congressional hearings? That's wild. Did they explain the direct result of that panic?
Absolutely. The direct, undeniable result was the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ESRB.
So the ratings we see on every game box.
Exactly. The political pressure was so intense that the industry was forced to self-regulate to avoid government control. The hosts emphasized that without Night Trap, we wouldn't have the standardized E for everyone, T for teen, M for mature system we rely on today.
That's a massive takeaway. The industry we know today was literally forced into existence by a controversy over a pretty mediocre game.
It was a huge turning point.
So shifting gears to the joy of gaming itself, the hosts frequently connected their personal play experiences to the broader industry evolution, especially through the lens of the Great Console Wars.
Their discussion of the year 1998 was a real highlight. In episode 137, they revisited that eternal conundrum facing gamers that holiday season.
Choosing between two absolute titans released almost simultaneously.
The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time on the N64 versus the genre-defining PC first-person shooter, Half-Life.
That kind of debate is just the heart of retro nostalgia. It's not just about which game was better, it's about which philosophy you bought into.
Right. Ocarina of Time perfected the 3D adventure formula, a beautiful linear masterpiece.
While Half-Life defined narrative-driven first-person shooters on the PC, but more importantly, its engine became the foundation for countless mods and community-driven content.
Exactly. C&Q argued that the Ocarina versus Half-Life debate was basically a clash between console-driven, polished, curated content
versus PC-driven, open, modifiable, community-generated innovation.
It set two completely different trajectories for the future of 3D games.
And that momentum carried forward, leading to another major anniversary they celebrated in 2025, the 30th anniversary of the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, episode 129 marked its groundbreaking impact, specifically noting its adoption of the CD-ROM format,
which dramatically expanded game size and lowered production costs compared to cartridges. It was a game changer.
Yeah. They contrasted Sony's aggressive success with Nintendo's slightly less essential peripheral releases of the time. They had a fun segment dissecting the N64 expansion pack.
I remember that thing. You needed it for certain games, right?
You did. It was necessary for key titles like Donkey Kong 64 and Majora's Mask, but it felt like an expensive add-on compared to the seamless, massive library Sony was building on CD.
The PS1, they argued, was just the more dominant and groundbreaking force of that generation.
No question. And their deep dives into iconic releases were extensive, moving across console generations and genres.
They covered the foundational 3D platforming of Super Mario 64, which set the standard for camera control,
The revolutionary trick system in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
and the birth of modern sandbox crime games with Grand Theft Auto 3 and the vastly expanded San Andreas.
But if they had to pick one foundational landmark from the 2000s that defined the social experience of gaming,
It had to be Halo 2.
how immense its impact was on gaming culture and sales. It was the catalyst for Xbox Live adoption.
They got wonderfully specific here, which is what makes their show so engaging. They didn't just mention the game. They remember the maps that defined their multiplayer nights.
Name-checking competitive arenas like Lockout and Midship.
They highlighted the intensity of that early, highly competitive Xbox Live era, arguing it was a precursor to modern esports culture.
It was the first time many people experienced a console game as a pure competitive sport.
A transition from split-screen couch competition to global online rivalry. And the hosts clearly cherished those memories.
They made the point that the level design of maps like Lockout dictated strategy in a way few other games had achieved before.
So moving from the, pristine architecture of early game design,
And the cultural earthquakes of tech.
we transition into the wonderfully messy, often ridiculous world of pop culture history. This is where C&Q truly embraces its chaotic charm.
Oh, absolutely. Beyond the pixels and processors, C&Q dedicated a massive chunk of their 2025 season to the glorious, ridiculous world of professional wrestling and these enduring cultural superstitions.
Yeah, the ones that blur the lines between sport and mythology.
And wrestling history provided some of the most chaotic and hilarious deep dives. Nothing topped the infamous, highly detailed analysis of the Shockmaster incident.
From episode 126, this was the disastrous 1993 WCW debut of wrestler Fred Ottman.
A moment the sources defined as enduring because of its pure, unscripted physical comedy.
The detail here is just essential to understanding the infamy. Fred Ottman, who had previously wrestled in the WWF as Tugboat and Typhoon,
Trivia the hosts absolutely loved.
was supposed to debut as this massive, intimidating new character, the Shockmaster.
And his entrance required him to dramatically crash through a drywall set piece.
But instead of a dramatic crash, he stumbled.
He didn't just stumble, he fell flat on his rear end while still mostly stuck in the wall, and his ridiculously cheap, glittery, stormtrooper-esque helmet.
It rolled across the floor in front of the camera.
And the hosts replay the audio. You just hear this awkward silence, followed by the commentary team completely losing it and laughing uncontrollably.
That is pure, uncut, unscripted gold, as the hosts themselves noted. But is calling it the best botch just hyperbole?
Well, they argued that it endures because it encapsulates the sheer comedic incompetence of WCW booking in the early 90s.
Right. It wasn't a minor slip.
No, is the entire premise of an intimidating character instantly collapsing into glittery tragedy on live television. It's a moment where reality just completely ruptured the screen.
And while the Shockmaster was a comical failure, they also discussed serious, long-lasting controversy, especially with WCW's storytelling, the infamous Ghost of Starrcade Past.
Yeah, in episode 141, they delved deep into the complexities of Starrcade in 1997.
They covered Sting's years-long transformation, the Crow character leading up to the main event against Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
And they highlighted the extremely controversial botched finish, where the referee made a fast count that was entirely unplanned.
It just completely undermined the dramatic build-up. And what was Bret Hart's role in all this?
Hart, who had just arrived from WWF after the Montreal Screwjob, intervened in the match, trying to force a pidoo of the finish.
What a mess.
A total mess. The hosts argued that this entire sequence, the botch, the confusing intervention, and the long-term controversy around Goldberg's streak, it all contributed to this psychological break between WCW and its audience.
Fans just started losing faith.
They did. So if WCW provided the dramatic narrative failures, WWF was not exempt from the bizarre and the genuinely cringeworthy.
Oh, not at all. Episode 138 revisited several truly odd moments.
Yes. They mentioned Diesel's bizarre 8-second title change in 1994, where he beat Bob Backlund for the championship at a house show.
Just a shocking, quick title switch designed purely for shock value.
And then there's the 1999 storyline that, even today, sounds like a fever dream.
Triple H drugging and marrying a kayfabe unconscious Stephanie McMahon.
The hosts spent a good amount of time reflecting on the sheer aggression and chaos of the Attitude Era that allowed a storyline like that to even air.
And their conclusion was that these bizarre, ethically questionable angles, while successful in the short term for ratings, really illustrate how far the company was willing to push boundaries.
Speaking of enduring chaos, one recurring, highly superstitious topic throughout C&Q's 2025 output was the Madden Curse.
This isn't just about bad luck, it's about a cultural narrative that seems to follow specific athletes.
That's right. The hosts consistently trace the curse's lineage across multiple episodes.
Right.
They start with Garrison Hurst on the cover of Madden 99, who suffered a career-altering ankle injury.
Then came Barry Sanders for Madden 2000, who shocked the world by retiring suddenly right before the season started.
But the sources define Michael Vick's tenure on the cover as the most definitive example, right?
Yes, Michael Vick, Madden 2004, was labeled the ultimate curse. His career, as they noted, imploded not due to injury, but due to criminal activity.
Right, which led to his imprisonment and a lengthy suspension. They argued that Vick's situation just transcended typical sports bad luck and became a genuine cultural talking point about the curse's power.
But they didn't just stick to the obvious victims. They debated the nuance of it all.
Yeah, in episodes 131 and 141, they questioned if you could really classify Ray Lewis or Drew Brees as true victims, noting they had relatively normal seasons.
But they were clear that the curse significantly affected Vince Young's career trajectory. After his cover, he never quite regained his early potential.
And the funniest, most retroactive curse connection they brought up was Donovan McNabb.
Right. In episode 133, they pointed out that his career troubles in Philadelphia began soon after his 2005 cover appearance.
The host admitted it might be a weak link, but they just enjoyed finding every possible instance where the curse could have struck. It's less about sports analysis and more about mythology.
Moving away from the ring and the gridiron, they also had plenty of non-gaming pop culture moments. Episode 141 featured guest Zach Ryan for a deep dive into the absolute absurdity of the 1994 Street Fighter movie.
They gleefully labeled it the best-worst movie.
High praise.
They highlighted the extreme production challenges.
Mm-hmm.
The director trying to film a war movie in Thailand during political instability. The chaos led to incredible on-set issues.
And they talked about how Jean-Claude Van Damme was reportedly challenging to work with.
And this whole segment wasn't just for laughs, but as a look toward the future, expressing anticipation for the new Street Fighter movie adaptation.
It's that constant contrast between the nostalgic past and the adapting present that makes their approach work so well.
That forward-looking nostalgia was also clear in their discussion of 90s consumerism. Episode 141 and 125 revisited the consumer chaos of the late 90s, especially the Tamagotchi panic of 1997.
Oh, that was a truly bizarre moment. A digital pet that required constant attention, or it would die.
And the hosts detailed the panic that ensued when parents couldn't find them and the lengths people went to acquire these small, beeping plastic eggs.
They linked the Tamagotchi panic to other manufactured frenzies like Beanie Babies, Tickle Me Elmo,
and the pervasive creepiness of Furbies. The hosts observed that Furbies, in particular, were seen as this early iteration of a creepy toy that could symbolize AI concerns.
connecting those early toy crazes to very modern anxieties about intrusive tech.
And linking that cultural anxiety back to their own lives, episode 141 had a segment contrasting parenting in the 80s and 90s when they grew up with the intense challenges of today.
They reflected on the dramatic shift in risk assessment. They grew up with way more unsupervised freedom.
Playing outside until the streetlights came on, largely independent. Today, they grapple with balancing that desire for freedom for their own kids with modern anxiety about safety and technology.
And this segment highlights that the underlying purpose of C&Q is really using the past to process the present reality of fatherhood.
Which brings us to maybe the most unique aspect of the show. If you stripped away the retro focus, you'd still have a fascinating listen because of the sheer, often self-inflicted chaos surrounding one of the hosts.
Oh, absolutely. This is truly where Cartridge and Quest separates itself from other retro gaming shows.
The personal chaos, and especially the high-stakes culinary adventures of Foodie Mike C, are a defining and constantly recurring feature of their 2025 season.
If you need to know why Foodie Mike C is Foodie Mike C, 2025 gave us just ample, often bewildering evidence.
Right. Despite the retro gaming focus, his competitive cooking triumphs were huge news all year. We learned he secured his 5th qualification for the World Food Championships.
And the discussion around his prep was fascinating. It revealed that competitive cooking is like a military-grade operation.
They talked about the stress of developing these highly technical recipes under extreme pressure, which contrasts hilariously with the casual nature of the rest of the show.
And his culinary influence extends far beyond the competitive kitchen. Episode 138 shared that amazing story of his USO tour.
where he cooked for military bases in Oklahoma. He detailed the incredible effort required to feed large numbers of service members.
But what really stood out was his recollection of the lighthearted trash talk with the Marines.
He essentially turned cooking into a competitive sport, challenging their food preferences and receiving as good as he gave.
It's just core to his personality.
Then there are the utterly random celebrity encounters that seem to find him. Episode 126 recounted the story of Mike accidentally sitting at the wrong table at a charity event.
And this mistake led to an unexpected friendship and the potential to cook for NBA player Grady Dick.
It's that pure, unplanned serendipity the hosts often muse about. They question how often minor mistakes like that can pivot your life.
The message being you have to embrace the chaos because sometimes the wrong table turns out to be the most interesting table.
And the travel stories are equally memorable and often centered on extremely mundane things. The trip to Napa in episode 130 was a true epic.
A mix of high culture and low comedy. Beyond the Michelin restaurant experience, Mike shared the philosophical impression left by a certain bathroom fixture.
Yes, the unforgettable, life-changing toilet. A high-tech Japanese model, fully automated heated seats, multiple wash functions.
The hosts spent a good few minutes just reflecting on the absurdity of such hyper-advanced, personalized sanitation technology existing in the same world where you had to blow into a cartridge just to get a game to load.
Forget the Michelin stars. Remember the porcelain.
And speaking of unforgettable sensory experiences, we absolutely have to mention the bizarre food experiments.
Sent in via their community airmail segment.
The flavor challenge, they tried pickle and barf flavored soda. I have to ask,
Right.
what was the consensus?
The consensus, which became a highly quotable takeaway for their community, was barf is better than pickle, people.
You're kidding!
Now, they debated the nuances of the artificial flavor profile. The barf flavor, while offensive, was strangely complex, whereas the pickle flavor was just aggressively unpleasant.
Did they even connect a barf soda taste test to cultural food practices?
They used these segments to springboard into Mike's unorthodox culinary projects. In episode 108, Mike teased a Salsas of Mexico cookbook, where he planned to incorporate things like American cheese and cream cheese. So the taste tests, even the bizarre ones, serve as a justification for his boundary-pushing culinary ethos. The idea that even terrible flavors can teach you something.
Is the beautiful irony of the show. These guys spend their time discussing obsolete tech like the Famicom and the Atari Lynx, yet they are constantly grappling with the most cutting-edge and often confusing aspects of modern life.
And that tension creates some of the most insightful and often hilarious segments.
Like in episode 137 where they joked about whether they might actually be AI or scripted.
A surprisingly self-aware moment. They admitted to trying to get ChatGPT to use cuss words and discussed AI's increasing impact on music and art.
They're using retro memory to combat the disorientation of modern accelerated technology.
Precisely. And that existential question is perfectly juxtaposed with the reality of the technology divide.
Right, like in episode 137 when Average Trav asked if Google is still used.
A perfect example of how quickly internet terminology changes. A simple misunderstanding that immediately dates you to the pre-smartphone era.
They also got into the thick of modern consumer tech debates, Apple versus Android.
Yeah, in episode 118, they discussed the industry struggle for USB-C consistency, lamenting the chaos of different charging standards.
And they noted that Apple is constantly playing catch-up to features Android introduced years ago, like call screening.
The hosts weren't just observing tech. They were expressing the frustrations of modern consumers. And the podcast production itself provided plenty of fodder for humor.
They were very open about the technical difficulties, the frozen host moment, streaming challenges.
And the terrible reality of losing an entire episode, a content creator's nightmare.
But they used these setbacks to build rapport, showing that even the pros are subject to hardware failures.
Despite the chaos, they celebrated major milestones like reaching double-digit episode numbers, a genuine moment of pride, and finally holding their first ever live show.
And that transition from digital content to real-world engagement leads us directly to the show's final major theme.
Their unique ways of fostering community and engagement. If the core of C&Q is nostalgia and the engine is Mike's chaos, the transmission is definitely their audience interaction model.
Nothing captures Average Trav's unique, often catastrophic gameplay style better than the recurring segment, What Would Trav Do?
or WWTD. Mike basically uses this segment to try and reverse engineer the chaotic decision-making process in Trav's gaming brain, usually in Fortnite.
It's a recurring, delightful train wreck. The segment details chaotic and fatal strategies.
Specific examples included Trav driving an X-Wing off a cliff for no reason or getting immediately stuck on a light pole.
Mike frequently documents Trav's questionable loot choices and failed plans.
But the genius of this segment is the counterpoint. The narrative is that Trav is a chaotic gamer, but then they revealed a surprising victory.
And Trav clearly enjoys mercilessly crushing his children at NBA Jam, so the chaos is usually contained to the Battle Royale setting.
Exactly. When the stakes are high, the decisions are terrible. When it's family bragging rights, he's ruthlessly efficient.
The hosts also fostered a uniquely positive and altruistic community engagement model. Foodie Mike introduced positive stream sniping.
Redefining a toxic gaming term.
That's fascinating. How do you turn stream sniping, which is usually cheating or harassment, into a positive act?
Instead of cheating, Mike searches Twitch for streamers who have 0 viewers and drops a significant donation to offer encouragement.
That's incredible.
He uses his platform to find and reward micro-creators who are grinding away to empty rooms. The hosts analyze the psychological impact of this. It takes a term associated with malicious intrusion and turns it into genuine altruism.
A powerful cultural reclamation. It speaks directly to the reality of starting out in content creation.
And they kept the audience engaged with regular trivia segments, too. The Cartridge Conundrum, which required deep niche knowledge.
Covering everything from PS1 trivia to N64 riddles.
And of course, they had the "What are these damn kids saying?" slang segment.
Essentially a generational translation service.
Exactly. It highlights the communication gap between elder millennials and Gen Z. They try to decode Gen Z slang, often with hilarious misinterpretations.
Another way they use the podcast to process the feeling of cultural aging.
Finally, we have to mention their incredible effort to engage locally and in person.
The Back to the Future block party in Wellington, Kansas.
A massive community event they coordinated. This wasn't a small gathering. It featured a rare running DeLorean, the actual star car, and a free movie showing in the town square.
The effort involved in securing a running DeLorean for a block party in Kansas just speaks volumes about their dedication to the quest part of their name.
So what does this all mean? We spent months listening to Average Trav and Foodie Mike analyzing episodes 105 through 141. And the sources show that their 2025 season was this successful tapestry.
Blending high-level tech history like the architecture of the World Wide Web, the ESRB system, with deeply personal, often chaotic humor.
They successfully blended industry controversy, like the Madden Curse and the Night Trap Panic, with the absurd realities of modern adult life.
Right. The necessity of prepping for the World Food Championships, kidney stone scares, bizarre food experiments.
And the profound, life-altering experience of a high-tech toilet in Napa.
The final takeaway for you is this. The show's enduring success lies in its vulnerability and specificity. It's not just about remembering what happened in the 90s.
It's about showing how those cultural artifacts, from 8-bit games to falling through a wall as the Shockmaster, provide a necessary shared framework for navigating the complex realities of being an adult, a parent, and a geek in the modern age.
And the core lesson C&Q extracted is still so relevant. Are we buying the best tech or the best user experience? That debate hasn't changed since the Atari Lynx failed.
By contrasting the slow, tangible failures of the past with the fast, disorienting successes of the present, they create a space where memory is actively informing the here and now.
Precisely. They question the speed of technology and their own ability to keep up.
So if the hosts of Cartridge and Quest are debating whether they themselves might be AI or sharing stories about strange, autopilot driving experiences where reality seems to glitch, what does that say about the fine line between human memory, program nostalgia, and modern technology?
A great closing thought. What cultural artifact from your past, a toy, a song, a technological failure, is currently shaping your present mindset without you even realizing it?
All right, today we're going to crack open a bit of a digital time capsule. We're talking about a show called Cartridge and Quest. And let me tell you, it runs on pure, uncut 90s nostalgia. And it all starts right here, with this exact feeling. You remember this, right? Wired controllers, battling your friends in the same room, not just over a headset. That feeling, that's what this entire show is built on. So that's really the promise of the show, a full-on trip back to a super specific, super memorable era of pop culture. It's all about reliving those moments that pretty much shaped an entire generation of us gamers and 90s kids. So, who's going to guide us on this expedition down memory lane? Well, let's meet the two friends who are really at the heart of this whole quest. Okay, so here they are, Average Trav and Foodie Mike C. Now, these guys are two friends who were both born in 1985. And think about that for a second. That's the same year the Nintendo Entertainment System landed and just changed everything. So they didn't just study this history, they lived it. They're the guys who grew up blowing on cartridges, and now they're navigating fatherhood together. All right, so the absolute core of the show is this segment they call the Retro Rewind. This is where they really get in there and dissect the iconic moments, the huge releases and even the cultural earthquakes that basically defined the 90s. And man, they cover a massive range of topics. I mean, we're talking about everything from the launch of Sonic 2 back in 92 to the Windows 95 phenomenon, which, by the way, cost Microsoft $300 million to market, and even the sheer panic of the great Tamagotchi shortage of 97. They don't just list them, they really dive deep into the whole context of these moments. And just when you think they're done, they go even deeper. They'll break down the legendary SNES versus Sega console war, the absolute dominance of Street Fighter II Turbo, and this one is just mind-boggling. Between 1988 and 1992, Playmates sold over $1 billion worth of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures. $1 billion! Yeah, this is some seriously good nerd history. But here's what I think makes the show so compelling. It's not just about video games. They branch out into all these different nostalgic side quests that really capture the full flavor of that whole era. Like, for example, they have this surprisingly deep, and I mean deep, knowledge of wrestling history. They relive some of the most infamous botches and storylines ever, from that bungled finish at Starrcade all the way to the legendary failure that we all know as the Shockmaster incident. And, they get into those classic debates we all had as kids. They'll argue about the best-worst movies. You know what I'm talking about? Like the 1994 Street Fighter film. And they even rank the top 5 scariest VHS covers from the video store. It's just a perfect hit of that media nostalgia. And what's cool is they connect it all back to their own lives today. They talk about how these retro experiences shaped them as adults, covering everything from their time in the military to the challenges of fatherhood and, passing the controller to the next generation. So what's the whole vibe? Well, they call it nostalgic nonsense. And honestly, that phrase perfectly captures the mix of deep dive history and just hilarious, irreverent commentary that totally defines their show. And this whole approach, it's clearly resonating with people. They've built a really solid community. We're talking over 11,000 likes on their TikTok alone. So yeah, people are definitely connecting with their specific brand of humor and nostalgia. And if you want a perfect taste of that nostalgic nonsense, here it is. This is from their breakdown of the Shockmaster incident. It's just so funny, so blunt, and it perfectly captures their style of reliving these absolutely bizarre moments in pop culture history. So as you can see, this is way more than just a history lesson. It's really an invitation to reconnect with a specific time and a specific feeling. So let's talk about who this is really for. Ultimately, this show is for a very specific person. Let me ask you this. Do you remember blowing on a Nintendo cartridge to make it work? Can you still hear that screech of a dial-up modem in your head? Do you remember the absolute agony of waiting a whole week for the next episode of your favorite show? If you said yes to any of those, then you are exactly who they're talking to. So the only real question left is, are you ready to hit that reset button and go back in time? All right, if you're ready, here's where you can find them. Cartridge and Quest has their full audio episodes over on Spotify, they've got video on YouTube, and of course you can follow them on social media at Cartridge and Quest. Go ahead, press start on your own nostalgic quest.